Good morning. Thank you so much for this introduction and welcome to the cherished panelists. I'm extremely delighted to have this conversation with you about manufacturing in Africa and the opportunities that the sector holds. You have already been introduced, so I will not go back and introduce you. I believe the audience has the conference materials, and if they wish to read more about you, then they are welcome to study those in order to understand your full background. Manufacturing in Africa is a big topic. In the next 5, 10, 20 years, Africa is expected to become the new global manufacturing hub. But there are still a number of things that need to be worked on in order to unlock the full potential of the sector. Of course, manufacturing has a tremendous job creation potential. In Africa, we currently have a very, very fast-growing workforce. And we know that currently, the African continent has to catch up with job creation. And manufacturing can play a key role here. We've also heard about the new African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is expected to double trade volumes within Africa. So there are a lot of things to talk about, but I won't talk too much because we have 4 experts here in the room, and I'd like to just get started with the conversation. And I would like to start with Kuseni. Kuseni, very warm welcome. I hope you're well today.
Thank you very much. I'm very well indeed. It's a great honor and privilege to be part of this panel.
Thank you so much for being part of it. I would like to get started with the first question for this panel in order to get our minds going. And my opening question to you is a bit more about trends. Obviously, I just laid out already that manufacturing is key to Africa's development and economic prosperity. But we need to figure out how we can follow the right trajectory for the continent. And I think in that vein, it would be interesting to hear from your perspective what you think 3 trends are that are really going to inform the future of the African manufacturing sector. 3 trends that you think are going to inform the future of the African manufacturing sector. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Yasmin, for the question. It's a very pertinent and crucial question. The first trend that I see that will shape the trajectory of African manufacturing, it's really the building back better and faster strategies that African governments and economies are adopting. I think at the core of that, the first thing we have to realize is that COVID-19 has really exposed the vulnerability and fragility of African supply chains. And how do we then, going forward, try and build resilient and effective and efficient supply chains? We need to start looking at building the right ecosystems within Africa to be able to build a world-class manufacturing sector that can produce products for Africa, but also be able to supply those products to the over 7 billion people in the world. And Africa has been caught napping, has been found wanting, but I think that's an opportunity, not a problem that we should mourn about, to look at creative and smart strategies and look at the experiences of countries in in the Asian region, look at countries elsewhere in the world, such as China and India, what they've managed to do very well. I mean, the second trend, which is really very important, is just really looking at how the overall business climate and investment climate across Africa enables manufacturing. We need to have the right policy instruments and policy interventions that are going to incentivize not just foreign manufacturers to come to Africa. We always like to talk about foreign investors coming to Africa, which is fine and important, but I think that there needs to be a shift to look at mobilizing domestic pools of capital, mobilizing domestic investors. I don't believe that Africans can develop Africa by looking at foreign investors that will come and invest in Africa. I think African companies must lead the charge by investing in Africa first so that others can follow. If you look at the European Union economy, most of the companies that invest there are EU companies. Look at the North American economy, most of the companies that are leading the charge in terms of investing there are North American companies. The same thing in China, the same thing in Asia. I think there needs to be a conversation around really building world-class African companies that can invest in Africa and export products to the world. I am fortunate to be chairman of such a company, which is Aspen Pharmacare. We have got 26 manufacturing plants, pharmaceutical manufacturing plants around the world. In South Africa, where I am now, we are manufacturing the Johnson & Johnson vaccine for African requirements, but also for exports to the rest of the world. We contracted to produce 31 million doses for South Africa by the end of this year, which we will be able to do so, and we're eminently capable of the capability and the capacity to do that. We also contracted to supply the rest of Africa, the African Union, with about 250 million doses. We are also capable of doing that. We can ramp up our capacity to about 400 million doses. But we are just one company. We need more companies that are leading the charge in various sectors, whether it's in automotive manufacturing, it's in telecoms, whether it's in the agribusiness space, whether it's in the digital space, that can also establish formidable and leading positions on a global scale to be able to be champions of Africa in the global economy. And then thirdly, the other trend that is very, very important is one that I really welcome, which has been unleashed by the realization that Africa has to trade and invest more with itself first, which is why I was pleased in January this year that the African Continental Free Trade Area that you spoke about, Yasmin, in your introductory remarks, was actually launched and made effective. And I think now the key issue is how do you operationalize it in order to create and sustain and perpetuate and promote a world-class manufacturing system? Because intra-regional trade is so key to enabling the sustainability of manufacturing in Africa. Africa is a notorious continent in the sense that it's the only continent that trades the least with itself and trades more with other continents outside itself than with itself. The African Continental Free Trade Area presents us with a historic and golden opportunity to deepen and maximize intra-African regional trade and investment.
Thank you so much, Husseini. I think this is a really interesting summary of trends. And what I am noticing is that all the three trends you mentioned, which was resilient supply chain building, more business and investment climate that is localized, and also strengthening trade, are actually very ecosystematic points. It's not so much maybe even about looking after the micro trends and how to look at operational excellence on a micro level. It's really about looking at manufacturing as an ecosystem and strengthening the whole sector as an ecosystem. At least that's what I'm learning from your contribution. You did mention resilience. I would like to know whether you think that Africa in manufacturing terms has been a winner or a loser from the pandemic. There are some articles that suggest that manufacturing has been strengthened amidst the pandemic because obviously it was harder to import certain goods and you had to localize a lot more production. What would you say, winner or loser?
I think it's a mixed bag, Yasmin, to be fair.
Okay.
There are pockets of excellence, which are there in Africa, which we should recognize and appreciate and celebrate. But also there are areas of opportunity for massive improvements. I think if anything, looking at COVID, it actually exposes the universe of opportunities that are there to invest more in African manufacturing. And I think having this Africa-Singapore Business Forum is really a great opportunity for us to look at what is it that Africa can do with Singapore, with Asia, and with the rest of the world to be able to unlock its full productive capacity in terms of supplying manufactured products. I think it is not a new revelation that Africa's manufacturing capacity is amongst the weakest, if not the weakest in the world. But I don't see that as a problem. I see that as an opportunity for us to invest in strengthening it and in leapfrogging other parts of the world, having world-class manufacturing processes and systems and sectors, and leveraging digitalization and leveraging technology, and leveraging the fourth industrial revolution to really take African manufacturing to the next level where we become leaders and others can follow. Just like not long ago, China was a follower, but now, China is emerged as a leader. Japan post-Second World War was a follower. Japan leapfrogged and became a leader. I think this is Africa's turn to leapfrog and use its youthful demographics, use the entrepreneurial energy and passion that you find in Nairobi, you find in Accra, you find in Cape Town, you find in Lagos and across all corners of the continent, and channel that and create world-beating companies, create the next sort of FANGs, as it were, which are led and run and owned by African entrepreneurs, just like we see in Singapore. I mean, Singapore is an amazing country. I was there beginning of 2020 for a global board conference, and just to see how the digitalization opportunity there has been leveraged, and how the ecosystem, as you're saying, world of ecosystems from a digital perspective. How do we create an ecosystem for world-class African manufacturing so that we can really make sure that we are leaders in that space and we take advantage of the big market opportunities that are there in the global economy? I see more opportunities for us not to be losers, to your question, but to be winners and leaders, and really set us of define us of best practice on a global scale.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You brought a lot of drive into the discussion. And absolutely, it seems currently is definitely a time where it's maybe at the crossroads to figure out whether we go down one path or the other. And I'd like to bring in our next speaker into the conversation. Vimal, I hope you can hear me well. Vimal, welcome to our panel. And of course, we've now already started talking a bit more about the pandemic. And the pandemic is obviously been accredited with pushing us to new heights with supply chains and manufacturing when it comes to flexibility and agile production. So I'd love to hear your perspective on the impact of the pandemic on the manufacturing sector in Africa. Do you agree that it's a mixed bag? Is it both winners and losers? Where would you see the continent right now?
Thank you, Yasmin, and thank you for inviting me on this panel. I think it depends on where you look at it from. If you look at it from a perspective of locally sourced raw materials, I think it's been a big booster, right? Because you got a lot more value added happening locally in Africa because supply chains were disrupted or whatever. And I think those people did well. So there was a boost in that. Second thing was, if you look at essential services and essential products, that really got a big boost because a lot more essential services were required. Whereas those who are in luxury products or which are disposable, you don't need really, you can do away with them, didn't do well. I think that was crucial. But at the same time, if you look at cement, steel, all went up. And I think there was a lot of construction going on during this time too. Luckily, Africa didn't have a serious problem as what the West or Asia had in terms of devastation. It wasn't that bad. So I think manufacturing kept on, essential services kept on. However, your question is threefold because you're talking about agile and flexible production networks. I think, frankly, a lot of people repurpose themselves. The garment industry I know of here in East Africa was exporting to US. Markets closed down. They were not importing anymore. They didn't want garments. So what did they do? They converted themselves to PPE manufacturing and medical kits and all that stuff. And it was done quickly. It was very agile. It was quickly done. Supply chains were disrupted. So sanitizers, soaps, cleaning products became like the in thing. And we had a surge also ourselves. And, demand went up drastically because now people are washing themselves 3, 4, 5 times a day. And that happened. So pandemic was a big booster in that sense for local production. However, I think it accelerated something about global supply chains. And this whole thing about rising protectionism has happened because of the US-China disruption that happened pre-COVID. In fact, this was pre-COVID, if we talk about it. They were trying to fight about it. And that was a big booster also for Africa. And I think going forward, it's going to be a much bigger booster because if you look at China, it had logistics, it had everything else running for it. The logistics pricing and everything else from China has gone up 3, 4 times. And that is a big impediment to Chinese production coming in for delivery for the supply here. So in Africa, what do we have? We have a demand. We have people. We have a supply side problem, which is very good for manufacturing. For manufacturing, if I have a supply shortage, it's good, go in and get it done. So I think that was important. The second thing was a lot of debt-laden companies, which had a lot of debt piled on them, were in trouble, because I think one thing for sure in Africa, debt is expensive, and it's very high interest rates, and therefore it's not like the EU countries or where rates are lower. So that happened. The consumer changed also, work from home, online shopping, a lot of digitalization, and therefore your malls shut down. So there was not a lot. Your supply chains had to be different. You need to supply to people directly, and therefore all your Ubers and your Jumias and all of them came up very well. So I think that happened, and that was the other issue about nearshoring, onshoring, and people were trying to say, look, can I get things produced locally? And a lot more of third-party manufacturing also happened, and that was quite crucial. So people were saying, look, can you make this for me? Even companies from Asia said, make this for me in those countries and I'll sell it in your country. So that happened together. So I think protectionism is not a big thing yet, but really we have a supply side problem. So the big booster going forward for a lot more manufacturing required here, using technology, leapfrogging, just like I think Kuseni said, we need to leapfrog and we need to digitize everything that we've got and use the latest technology in Africa. So I think I'd sum it up in that manner.
Thank you so much. Really interesting point. I mean, I think what I'm hearing from you is also that there's obviously an important sectoral lens, because there are some sectors that were huge winners in the sense that they were able to catch up and even boost their production as a result of the changes that we're experiencing. But it also depends on the strength of leadership, I guess, because the repurposing of assets that you were talking about is not an easy task. But if you're up for the challenge, then you can come out much stronger. I also think that it's really interesting how you were talking about understanding the consumer trends. And I'd like to ask a quick follow-up question on that before I move to the next speaker. Obviously, a lot of manufacturing companies in Africa started out with probably serving the African consumer mostly, because there's so much gap to fill here in terms of products and services needed. But going forward, if we wanted to really significantly increase the value added from manufacturing to African GDP, do you think we have to pivot more towards understanding the global consumers so that we can serve more global consumers with our products and unlock the global trade potential? What do you think about that?
That, Yasmin, comes as a huge opportunity. I'll tell you, one of our own companies, which was producing juices and stuff like that, we've now started exporting to the entire Middle East and also to Europe, because in Europe, supply chains were disrupted and we were competitive coming out from here. So we've done a lot of that, and that's helped in a massive way to give them the consumer product that they want in the Western countries. So I think that opportunity, African companies must not always say we're only for local. I think we've got to say, can we export for the US, Europe markets and really be competitive in that sense? I think that's important for us, and local value added from local produce. We've been exporting raw materials all along. All our cotton used to go as cotton. All our tea used to go as tea. Now we're producing tea bags, ready-made. We're producing textiles, garments, ready for sale. I think that's where the value addition equation becomes much more stronger. And we've got the people, we've got the land, we've got whatever it takes. All we need is the formation of capital, bringing it together for a purpose that is, supplying the market. So I think, to answer your question very clearly, I think it's important that a lot more people can do more with local value added.
Thank you so much. Great. I'll definitely come back to you. We're already starting to get quite a few questions from the audience, but let's first go through the initial statements of each speaker. I'm going to continue with Sri. Sri, I hope it's okay to address you this way. I saw in your biography. Okay. Welcome to the panel, and great to have you. I hope you're well.
Good. I'm doing good. Thank you.
Awesome. So I think we already started hearing a little bit in the previous contribution from Vimal about the whole onshoring trends. A lot of multinational enterprises are trying to see how they can shorten distance. How can they get closer to the source of supply? And I think it would be interesting to hear a bit more from your perspective how these trends of onshoring are accelerating things between Africa and Asia and what the future may hold for those two countries doing business, or those two parts of the world doing business with each other.
Well, thanks, Yasmin. First of all, thanks ESG for having me in this panel, and I'm delighted and excited to be in this panel. Very little, before really getting on to your answering your specific question. Briefly about Olam, my experience, I've been associated with Africa for last 30 years and all that with Olam. And Olam is, as a company, is in agri sector. We are in agri farm to fork company. That's how we define ourselves. And we operate in more than 24 countries across Africa. And I had grown with Olam in Africa, so I see the African journey on manufacturing. And yesterday and today, both yesterday we saw the Senior Minister Thurman as well as the Dr. Adesina both speaking about the huge opportunity in the agri food processing and food manufacturing, producing opportunities across Africa. And today, again, that was reiterated by the Minister Alvin Tan in his fireside chat. So, I want to just focus on the food agri manufacturing, and we have other experts in the panel who could discuss about the other sectors. So you asked about whether the pandemic, has really the onshoring from Southeast Asia, Singapore has really hastened towards Africa and all. Well, I would like to slightly step back and see. I want to look at our own, Olam's on-hand experience. As I said, we are in the agri sector. We are in, we buy we buy cocoa, cashew, lots of, agri commodities from Africa. And we started like buying them as like any other company, and exporting those commodities to other developed markets and then processing them in those geographies. So I'll give a specific example of cashew. Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, is the world's second largest producer of cashew today. And we have been operating in Ivory Coast for last almost 27 years. And we used to buy the cashew from Cote d'Ivoire, and all those cashew used to come to this part of the world, India or Vietnam. And those were the two major cashew processing hubs in the world. And then the processed cashew we used to process in India or Vietnam, and then those processed cashew used to be exported to Europe and US. And we felt that it's something amiss. A simple commodity like cashew travels almost 10,000 kilometers across the globe, and then get processed, and then again travels 15,000 kilometers to the other part of the world, and it just didn't make sense. And so we decided that we should break this. And we started slowly processing the cashew at the origin itself. So Cote d'Ivoire, we started way back, almost 20 years back, we started in a small scale. And today I'm happy to say that we are, transforming or processing more than 50% of the cashew what we source in Cote d'Ivoire itself. And what it has done is not only, the value add, the creating employment, and cashew, as you know, is one of the largest. Cashew processing is one of the largest employment creator, and especially for the rural women. So it has ticked all those boxes. But not only that, obviously it has added huge, enormous value to the economy. But in today's context, it has also touched so much of the carbon footprint. If a cashew has to come all the way from, say, Cote d'Ivoire to Vietnam and then go to US, you can see the amount of carbon footprint, amount of this one it has to go through, and that has really cut down. So today we directly export to Europe or US. So, and that's classic. And this has not happened overnight. We have to be aware that if you have to compete, if you have to export to those markets, we have to compete with cashews coming from Vietnam and or India, either side of the world, and you have to be competitive. And yes, you can save on freight and all, but when we started, even after all those cost saving in transportation, freight, etc., still our processing cost used to be higher than what it is in this one. We would not be able to compete, and we had to really subsidize, or we had to really, but things have changed. So really, it is a journey, and the journey has started well before the pandemic. And the pandemic has only, if at all anything, has bit hastened in sectors like Kumi talked about how the pharmaceutical setup. Suddenly now we were able to manufacture vaccines, say Johnson and Johnson vaccine for the African continent. These, and Vimal talked about a lot of repurposing and short term this one. I think yes, those are extremely thing. It's like a fillip to an otherwise, a long marathon run. It's a stretch where it has helped us to do a bit of a sprint. But to me, the longer term, when we talk about this pandemic, is not. We are going to see an end of this pandemic soon. I'm really hoping that sooner than later. And we are now talking about the mega trends, the 2050 population, and Africa is well on that journey. And I have given you a very clear story of Ulam example, in house example, where an expertise which was very much there in the Southeast Asian markets, we were able to transform to the farthermost of Africa, say Western African hub, and successfully able to transform that. And now we are expanding that processing footprint to other cashew growing origins across Africa.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much for giving us the wider lens. I think what's really great about what you explained is that it's obviously a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. Obviously, from a just cost analysis standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to try and do more onshoring and bring processing closer to the source of supply. But then the process of getting there is a longer one. And obviously, you have to be patient and expect that there's a bit of a learning curve to go through. Olam has successfully done so, which is very impressive. I think one question I'd like to ask as a follow-on to you, Sri, is you spoke about competitiveness, and you were saying that for a while you even had to subsidize because you weren't getting the efficiency levels yet to be globally competitive. But I think this global competitiveness question is a really seminal one. What are the factors that can make the African manufacturing sector and the products that are coming from here globally competitive? So if you had to answer that question, would you say it's really just being the cheapest? Or are there also other things that can allow us to globally compete with our products that are manufactured here?
See, obviously you have to be cost competitive. Whichever, even if you are selling a Louis Vuitton, handbag, you have to be. Louis Vuitton will go to a place where it can produce competitively. So cost competitiveness is fundamental, and it's critical to have a sustainable, manufacturing footprint anywhere. So, having said that, I would say that it's a host of things which brings the competitiveness. There are hard factors, there are soft factors, there are skills, there are First, you need to have a relevant scale. Obviously, to really compete with the products from, say, Southeast Asia, say China or this one. There, China is, people call it as a world's manufacturing hub. So if you need to really compete with any this one in China, then you need to have at least a critical scale. Then there are lots of hard factors, and that is where I think Africa is probably a bit behind. these are, again, I don't want to give a laundry list of repeating them. It's those logistics, the infrastructure, the power, but things are changing. Things are leapfrogging, and the technology is also doing wonder. There's a lot of digitalization happening, and then it neutralizes lots of those stuff. Yes, still some physical infrastructure, whether it is port or the connectivity and all that. And I'm sure with the onset of AFCT-CFA, then these things also will go through a sea of change. Then the key thing is building the skill of the people, whether it is cashew, whether it is, electronics or this one, you need to have that capacity. And that is where corporates like us are, along with, the government, we do those, we have a role to play. And that is my strong belief. You cannot just leave only to the policymakers, the governments to say that, okay, you need to have. So you need to, if you just leave it to the policymakers, they will just, you can see, they can build universities, they can build colleges, education institutions, but what is relevant, a smartphone assembly manufacturer need people who with the relevant skills. A cashew processing, a food processing guy needs people with a relevant skill. And that is where we need to collaborate with the local governments and this one to ensure that we are able to develop people and with the requisite skill. And there again, with the demographic benefits or the advantage Africa has with such a large, world's largest youth population, you have a really a win-win kind of this one, if we have the right approach and we have the right way to go about it. And again, here there are no shortcuts.
Thank you. I think we've definitely learned that we have to accept that things take time, but we are getting there from what I'm hearing from you. I like that you brought up the people point and skills point, because even if you have a big factory with big assets, it's still people behind a lot of the operations. And of course, it's important that we continue investing in people's skills so that we can also be at the forefront of product innovation and quality in addition to cost advantages. Dave, I need to bring you into the discussion now. I'd like to warmly welcome you to our panel. How are you today?
Oh, very good, thank you. It's a great honor to be here. And I'm picking up all sorts of points in the conversation already. That's fascinating.
Absolutely. I think I'm also getting a red tail of questions from the audience already. Actually, the first question directly hit at your sector, automotive, but I will come to it a little later. I think we've now heard from your three fellow panelists, and there's a lot been said. But obviously, the whole term of leapfrogging and digitization/technology keeps coming up. And I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about what you see the future of that to be. And I have to bring a little anecdote into here. We have a client at AFG that is in Nigeria, where we had a conversation a couple of months ago about the need for more digital operations. And the answer from the operations director was, well, I mean, yes, we could, but then labor is so cheap in Nigeria. Why should I bother to bring in digital solutions that can save me money? I might as well just continue making use of hundreds of people to do what other companies do with a quarter of the workforce, because it's just not that expensive here to do so. So I think digitization and technology is definitely a bit of a mindset shift as well. But I'd love to hear from you, especially with your automotive industry lens, how you see the future of digitization and technology innovation in manufacturing in Africa.
So thank you. And maybe just to start off by just sharing who we are as an association. We're a younger association, founded in 2015. And our members are global vehicle manufacturers, component manufacturers, and service providers that contribute to the ecosystem. And our vision is to work with African governments across the continent to develop and implement automotive policies that will attract investment. And that is our driver, and obviously to unlock the economic potential. So when you look at the COVID situation, the new vehicle demand, which is actually very low in Africa because of the used car imports, dropped by 26%. So it was a tough period for new vehicle sales. But it also, for me, heightens the opportunity for governments to introduce the policies which I'll talk about, which will allow the sector to grow. So, just going back to the trends, the automotive industry is global. The competition is global. The products need to compete on the global stage. However, low-cost segments are more relevant to Africa than in luxury segments. But in terms of 4IR and replacing expensive manual labor with cheaper smart robots, it's probably more relevant to developed economies like Japan and Western Europe than it is to Africa, going to what you said there. However, sustainable and digital production can also help with quality control, as well as once vehicles or parts are manufactured, to trace the genuine parts and properly homologated vehicles, and to detect fake parts. So there's a real challenge of fake and substandard product coming into Africa. And there's a better way to do that, obviously, with the digitalization. But other than the strongly developed economies in the auto industry of South Africa and Morocco, smart factories in Africa in the auto sector are very limited because of the low level of industrialization that exists today. Where we introduce new automotive programs with governments, like we did in Ghana, Ghana announced a program in March 2020. There today, you have VW assembling, Toyota's just announced its assembly program, Nissan's going to start early in the new year, and you've got a number of OEM models that are going to be coming through. We start with the semi-knockdown assembly, which is at low volumes. And as volumes grow, that's when the industrialization through the value chain is enabled. And it will generally take place in partnership with a global organization and a local organization. I like what Kuseni said there about mobilizing local investment, but you also need to bring some technology in here in a partnership. I think that's very important with the sector. But whilst the volumes grow in the auto sector, there's also the opportunity to develop manufacturing for high volume aftermarket parts which are imported. They can be substituted. And that's what's important, that we're doing a lot of work on the ground now in various African countries to develop that capability. And you find companies abroad to partner organizations with capability that's for a different sector. And you bring them in out of the oil and gas into automotive or from agriculture. And that's what we've got to do now. We really need to create that industrial base in these countries. So, but just from a trend perspective, and Kuseni touched on it, I see a trend of industrial policy development across Africa. It's coming in more and more sectors. It's very strong in our sector. Governments are driving programs to develop value chains, to create employment and lift and diversify the economy. We cannot continue to export raw materials like rubber out of West Africa into Europe so people can make tires in Europe. We have to add value in Africa. It's absolutely critical, and we've heard examples. We have huge deposits of cobalt in the DRC. With electrification coming through, it's very important, and I know that the DRC is working on this now, and they've got a convention coming up to explore this. How do we add some value to that? We're not necessarily say we're going to make the battery, but add some value in the continent and then ship it out. And there's many examples like that we seriously have to change. But the trend of this trend of industrialization will enable Africa to become a stronger force in the global value chains. And this will be supported by viable and commercially viable and modern technologies that international players will bring along. But developing these regional value chains is high on the agenda. I engage with the African Union from an order perspective, with the Free Trade Area Secretariat, and all these organizations are strongly driving the auto sector, as well as agro-processing, pharmaceutical, and others. They're right up there now. And I'm such a fan of the free trade area. We could talk a bit about that later, because it's really bringing some impetus to this industrialization initiative. And lastly, there's a lot of interest from abroad, and more recently, Europe has becoming very strong to work with us because they see the challenge of electrification. They see the challenge with what it's going to do to their economy and jobs. And it's a great opportunity because we believe that Africa is the next, if not last, automotive frontier, right? So therefore, come and join us with there. We invite the participants on this call. Come and join our drive to industrialize Africa. There's great opportunity here from Singapore and surrounding economies. It's an exciting journey, and there's a lot of interest, and it's gaining momentum. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. I think you've made a big case for building ecosystems around specific manufacturing sectors, in your case, automotive, by also really building a strong international network around the sector and showing how technology and capital can then be transferred successfully in order to accelerate its growth. So that's great. I think I'd like to maybe also ask one follow-on question, which is more related to the whole idea of leapfrogging. Obviously, there is a big trend currently globally towards more green transportation. And I think even Sri had already alluded to the fact that the cut in carbon emissions is also playing a big role in the change of their onshoring of processing. So now we're looking at the African automotive sector. Obviously, it's far away from green right now. But do you think that there's a leapfrogging opportunity here for Africa to get to the forefront of manufacturing of green vehicles?
It's going to take some time, Yasmin, on the electrification of vehicles in Africa, and there are a number of reasons. The first is that we struggle with affordability of vehicles today in Africa. We want to bring in an electric vehicle that's actually costs more. We don't have affordable finance in many countries. People can't get finance. The infrastructure and source of power is not always readily available for this new sector coming through. So I don't think you will see scale of electric vehicle production in at least 10 years in Africa. It will come, right? But what we do see is a transition of different drivetrain technologies to get there. Certain countries have got huge supplies of gas, for example. People are talking hydrogen in the hybrid vehicles. So we think that there's a roadmap in getting to electrification out of the ICE combustion engines that is today. So it will be a progression, it will arrive, but it will just take a bit longer. And there will be a journey through, because if you go and use some of these natural resources to drive vehicles, you also can address balance of payments issues, because there's the motor industry is a huge forex problem for African countries, and with the fuel imports that come into Africa. So that there will be a transition to getting to that point over time.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. I think you are now also joining Sri's camp of it's a journey, but it's obviously very true. I think it's extremely important to acknowledge that. And obviously, there's so much opportunity to capture, but doing it at the right pace and in the right way is what's really important. And there's a lot of collaboration opportunity also for businesses and investors in Singapore to support that journey. Hussaini, I would like to come back to you. You gave us a great opening to our panel, and now we've progressed. There's quite a bit of questions from the audience around one of the points you had also brought up around the availability of capital and investment. I think there's a bit of a question around, okay, how can we actually strengthen that and really make sure that manufacturing companies, both existing that are looking to expand, but also new ones that are looking to start out, are really able to access that capital. I think it would be interesting to hear from your perspective how we can improve things around that so that we can really unlock the future potential of the manufacturing sector.
That's a great question, Yasmin, that you're raising. It's frequently asked all the time. I usually turn around and say it's not so much the lack of capital that is a problem or that is a challenge, but it's the lack of bankable projects. I think there is enough capital doing the rounds, but there are few bankable or investable projects. And maybe we need to ask ourselves, what can we do to assist African entrepreneurs, African countries and economies to be able to package projects such that they're investable and that they're actually bankable. I mean, as Aspen, we recently got a 600 million euro facility from the IFC and the other sovereigns, supported by the US government, the German government, as well as the French government, for our pharmaceutical manufacturing facility in South Africa. But the focus is not just pharmaceutical manufacturing capacity and capability in South Africa, but what can we also do to be able to transfer skills and expertise to other parts of Africa, which are also looking at developing their own capacities and their capabilities. As Dave said, there is an upsurge in industrial policies across the continent in various sectors and in various industries. And I think there's a need for a more coordinated effort and sharing of expertise and sharing of knowledge in terms of doing that. So I think the issue of capital is a challenge, but from my experience, it's not so much the problem. We, within Massmart, which is other company that I'm chairman of in the retail side, we also invest in manufacturing by supporting manufacturers that are part of our supply chain. We assist them with grants where grants are needed. We also assist them with expertise, industrial engineering expertise, to promote and enhance their productivity and efficiencies, and also assist them with offtake for them to access our supply chain, not just in South Africa, but also elsewhere in other parts of the continent where we operate. You know, in 13 countries in Africa, in West, East, and Southern Africa, but we're also part of Walmart in the USA. We've assisted some of our suppliers, manufacturers, to access the global Walmart supply chain. So I hear the point about capital, but I think it's more about bankable and investable projects that are there. I think there is enough capital. Maybe I'm biased in speaking in the context of South Africa, but also continentally, there's the African Export and Import Bank, which we all know about. There's African Development Bank, which we also know about. And you've got, you know, a growing banking sector across the continent as well, which we can leverage. We've got private equity players that are focusing on investing in Africa, with development finance institutions, you know, from other parts of the world, and looking at projects to fund and business people to support.
I think your point is absolutely key, and I agree. I mean, if you look at the situation 20, 25 years ago, maybe, it was probably true that access to finance was mainly driven by the lack of supply of capital. But now when you look at it, there are a lot of financiers out there that are actually struggling to deploy all the capital that they have available for Africa, be it development finance, be it private equity or what have you. So definitely the bankable projects point is a very big one. I think it's interesting that you are alluding to the role that established manufacturers can play in building opportunity for smaller ones that are in their direct supply chain network to also grow and get access to that, be a hub for bankability of projects from these suppliers as well, so that we see the entire ecosystem grow. So there's probably also more onus on all of us to make sure that we are part of the solution. But thank you so much for the point. I think it's a really, really important one. And I'd like to address another one to Vimal. Vimal, you were also talking earlier about access to capital, and we've now talked a little bit about what the challenges are here. But now one of our participants in the audience is also directly putting this into relation with the importation of products that are now really making us scramble for the local consumer markets, because often these imported products may be manufactured in places where access to capital is much cheaper, and where, as such, even though they're imported, they might have a price advantage over the locally produced alternatives. So the question we have here is, how can we fix that? How can we make sure that locally manufactured produce is competitive against the imported ones for a more sustainable growth of our sector?
Thank you, Yasmin. That's a very important question. I think when you look at the whole concept, it's one of competitiveness. What makes another country more competitive than Africa? And what doesn't make us competitive? What makes us uncompetitive? So the factors of production are, materials, it's manpower, it's machinery, it's the processing and the type of processing, and of course the utilities, and of course cost of capital and cost of utilities also. So when you look at that, I think it's important that Africa leapfrogs, and I think that's important for us to talk about, because if you look at the whole solar array right now in terms of renewable energy, solar can come out much more cheaper for Africa in many aspects, right? So that's going to be one strong thing. Second thing is manpower. We have available, opportunity cost is low. We have available people to be able to produce and to be able to sort of, provide the manpower for that. Number three, the leveler is digitalness. Now we've got a digital platform which is equal across the board. What you see in New York launched tonight, you'll see it in Nairobi or in South Africa or in Accra, wherever. You see it launched at the same time. So that's a leveler. Now the only thing is, where is the supply and where's the demand, right? What demand are we servicing? If it's local production, we have a lot of issues around taxation and governments trying to finance themselves through adding more and more taxes and burdens on various people. I think that's important for us all as private sector, government and private sector, working together to say, let's make it more competitive. Number three is also economies of scale and economies of scope. I think Sri talked about it because that's very, very crucial to have cost competitiveness. Number three is, if it's agriculture and agribusiness, we've got to go back to the type of product that we're getting. So yields per acre, go up much more higher once you have scientific and technology being used as the main germplasm that you use for planting. So again, we've got to get onto top of that and say, fine, what is required for us? So when we look at all of that, everything, whether it's cars, the next stage for electric cars could be Africa, produced for the whole world. Why not? All we need to bring is that capital, the technology, and say, we've got massive efforts being done here. We don't have the problem of the legacy systems. A lot of Western countries, a lot of Asia has legacy systems where they've invested so much in old capacity, they can't change quickly. We can be agile, we can be quick because we don't have that. We can leapfrog to the latest and say, let's go. I think what's important is have local ground knowledge. At the same time, align people in terms of being long-term. I think for Africa, frankly, it's not going to be a get in, get out situation, make a lot of money and just stay put. It's got to be here for the long term. It's got to be here to say, I'm here to make a difference. And I think that's going to be important. Number three, being sustainable, very, very crucial. So that when you become sustainable and you become modern in terms of your technology, you can use fintech, agtech, edtech, whatever high-tech stuff you use, it will make us more competitive here in Africa. And I think we must not shy away from saying, let's use the latest technology because we can manage it, we can adopt it. And I think that's important. Number three, I think when you talk about renewables, solar and the whole hydrogen, wind space, we've just got to get into it rather than say, let the West do it and then we get into it. We can leapfrog into that straight away. And I think climate smart change is important. At the same time, ESG is crucial. So all companies need to adopt that as a given. And I think having, returns are going to be a byproduct, in my opinion, for Africa. When you say returns, long-term 10-year returns are going to be very high. The multiples are going to be high. But if you say a bankable project means I need returns in 6 months, in 1 year, and I get in and get out, flipping companies is not going to happen. So that's important for investors. Again, being passionate about Africa like we are, and I think it's important to say, come to Africa to come and make a big difference, and at the same time make some money. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this was a great contribution, and it's really important to highlight that there needs to be intent. I think a lot of the points you're making are really around long-term planning, making sure we understand the markets, that we find the right pockets of opportunity so that we can drive the right value proposition in the manufacturing sector towards the consumer. And I think that it's really important here to also have these kinds of discussions where we can bring together leading manufacturers like yourselves in order to talk about these strategies. So thank you very much for your contribution. Sri, I would like to come back to you as well with a follow-up question. And this one is a bit more technical and was slightly alluded to in the last contribution. It's around the taxation situation in Africa. I think taxation obviously has a pretty big impact on the competitiveness of products that are being manufactured here and exported. What would you say to a Singaporean business person that wants to start doing business in Africa, how they can navigate that?
Yeah, thanks, Yasmin. That's a good question. See, it's not just the taxation per se. It's a multiple taxation or multiple levies, and that makes it difficult. Having said that, from a Southeast Asian point of view, for a Southeast Asian businessman, business thrived here. Probably the regulations, the various taxations, the regulations in most parts of Africa, or some parts of Africa, are what it used to be in, say, in the Southeast Asian region about 20 years back. But how Southeast Asia leapfrog, and we heard in today's Minister Alvin Tan's speech about the ASEAN regional hub, how they have played and how they have harmonized, how they have, but the business thrived even 20 years back. Businessmen from Singapore were happy to invest in Indonesia, go to other, markets, and they did navigate that. So, but having said that, Africa is already changing. You see FCTCA, even forget Free Continental Trade Agreement, which is of a recent one, which is still probably in the making, in the sense that to finally roll out. But there are a lot of regional issues. This East African community, already a single custom, this one, a Singaporean company, which is actually creating that platform and rolling out. So these things are changing. You as one of the panelists said, and it is true. So if you want to do business in Africa, first you have to be in there. You cannot do a remote management or do a desktop this one and say that, oh, okay, this is not there, this is not there. Because if you go by just media reports or this one, media would like to sensationalize what it creates a story. So a negative news is a news. A positive news is not a news. And similarly, when you go there, and there are businesses which have been thriving in Africa, the Southeast Asian businesses, and lots of examples. If taxation is such a big issue, we could not have, say, as company of Volam, we could not have managed. And I gave an example of how we manage the cashew processing story. So yes, it is not as it is now currently this one, but things are fast changing. And also, I want to say now with the global minimum taxation, which is something which countries are signing into already. G20 has adopted it, and it's going to. So really, the tax havens are going away. In probably in another 5-7 years time, you will hardly find any real tax havens, and there will be some amount of neutrality will come in terms of taxation. So all other advantages, as Vimal has rightly pointed out, to be competitive, and other panelists had pointed out, and that is where it is. And you need to have a long-term view. If you are going to set up a manufacturing, going in and doing it, you need to have a long-term view. You cannot go with a 6-month, 12-month, 1-2 year kind of this approach. And probably that is something which is okay for trading. Even that is not this one. You need to go with a long-term view. And there is a market, there is a landscape, there is an opportunity. And we can create a win-win kind of a situation for all.
Thank you so much, Sri. I think it's really important to highlight again that long-term thinking is extremely important to be successful here. And also, really, you have to be on the ground to navigate the individual market conditions. And at the end, you can probably make it work with the right structure and the right product focus. I'd like to address the last question from the audience to Dave. Dave, I had already mentioned that there were some specific questions around automotive. I think we have mostly covered those in your previous contributions. But what is still a repetitive topic in some of the things I'm seeing here is definitely around the African continental free trade area. Obviously, it's been applauded widely as a big move towards more intra-African trade, as removing a lot of important and previously high soft barriers to trade. But then how successful can it really be if we still don't have the roads and the infrastructure to move things around effectively? It would be interesting to hear a little bit what your perspective is on the physical infrastructure barriers we currently have to unlocking our manufacturing and trade potential in Africa, and what can be done to really solve them at a much higher pace so that the sector can grow.
So when we engage a government on a policy, there are 9 themes to that policy. It's not just an incentive. One of them being infrastructure. So the skills, the component development, the legislation. So it's a compilation of critical areas. And it has to be done, but it starts with policy. You know, policy precedes everything. When you put the industrial levers into place, then it starts happening. And it's whether it comes really back to the political willingness. And therefore, we talk about the coalition of the willing across Africa. There are certain African states right now that are actually progressing, and there are a few hubs, and that's how our vision is going to play out. We believe in the next 15 years, the new vehicle demand will increase from 1.2 million pre-COVID to 5 million. That's quite substantial, but it revolves around key countries across the continent that are going to develop these policies, and they will need to deal with the infrastructure too. But it will start with a policy of which the infrastructure will be part. It's critical. It's critical that with this trade, we need seamless trade across countries. You know, we need the customs and the trade administration to work very effectively in all of this. So it's infrastructure is one of a number of ecosystem critical items that needs to be addressed, but it's got to be addressed.
Thank you so much, Dave. With that, we are sadly already out of time. I think the time has flown by, and I would first of all very much like to thank our esteemed panelists. You've brought so much perspective, so much energy, and so much insight into the room. I'm sure that the audience has greatly learned from this discussion, and I personally also learned a lot hearing from you. I think in summary, we've definitely learned that the manufacturing potential in Africa is tremendous. We are on the cusp of seeing even bigger changes and shifts in the sector. There is a lot of capital available to make the sector grow fast and sustainably. We just have to make sure we come up with the right ideas and the right structures to capture the opportunity. And of course, that will be a big opportunity as well for partners from places such as Singapore to come in and support the businesses that are already doing great work here. So thank you so much from my side. I'm looking forward to following your work in the coming months and years and seeing your companies bring Africa to greater heights. And with that, I'll pass back to the MC and wish you a great rest of your day.